Hey, it's Stu, and this video is going to be about everything, basically. I feel like I have a lot to talk about, and I want to talk about it, and then I kind of want to move on from it because the holidays are coming, and that's just changing, my reading. So I traveled over the weekend. I'm going to travel again this coming next weekend. That forces me to mostly listen instead of read. Lots going on. Let me try to do a quick weekend review plus a quick what I should put on my TBR for the rest of the month, maybe, plus just the highlights of a couple of little mini hauls that I did. So I just want to bring up Regeneration again because I did finish it and I've had a little time away from it, and I was really bogged down somewhere in the beginning. I had a really hard time getting into this book, as I said before. I can't quite really identify why, because I liked this book. People should read this book. I think this is I would even go on to say, prolific book. It really does interrogate World War I, the impact of it, psychological treatment methods, it really, that contemplation of who's crazy, the one who needs to be made sane to go back to war because they don't want to go back to war, or the people making them go. So I'm going to put this with The Eye in the Door together in a little free library because I think someone would like the first. I don't have the Ghost Road, and maybe if I did, I would feel differently about finishing the trilogy. But I feel like this would be a revisit book later on in life. I'm glad that I finished it. It definitely was worth whatever award it won. The next book I want to talk about is All the Little Bird Hearts, by Victoria Lloyd Barlow. This is for Neurovember, and I listened to it. It also fits under Booker list, long or short listed authors, because indoor books, because this book was, in fact, long listed in 2023. I really enjoyed this book. As far as the exploration of neurodivergence, I didn't feel like a voyeur. I felt like it was a part of the character's identity that I was able to experience with the character, as this author chose the first person, as Victoria Lloyd Barlow chose the first person. And instead of instead of the readers knowing things kind of at the behest or almost making fun of the character. And it seems that the character actually has a lot of insights in this book that the readers don't have. Of course, there's a little thriller element to this, and there's some suspense building. But I also deeply appreciate how that suspense was built and how the tragedy of the story ended up being explained as a tragedy. Highly, highly recommend that book, and I'm really glad that I came to it during Neurovember. The next book that I read, I think it was also a listen, so I'm trying to think of what I was reading during that time. It might have been swing time. Was Turtles All the Way Down by John Green. Great listen. Kind of, I chose this for Neurovember because in this book we have a diagnosis as well, and this is someone who is diagnosed with anxiety, and intrusive thoughts. And I thought that John Green did an excellent job of really building understanding, compassion, and empathy for a character that experiences intrusive thoughts. It was an interesting also meditation on teenage relationships and the things that impact them. I mean, the things that are diagnoses and not, but also impact how relationships are built. There is a little mystery in it, but I think that was part of the intrigue to kind of build the plot. But this is very much more a relationship based and character building book. It did sort of read like your kind of classic teenage drama. So if I'm not mistaken, it's been made into a series. It read and felt like that. And I mean, that is not a criticism of mine. I don't particularly usually like books that then become series or something, because especially if I feel like the author wrote for that purpose. And I think that literature has a different purpose and uses different devices than film, but that is just all an aside. I have a friend who wants this book, so it's going to a friend. The next book that I read, I mean, it was a long, sloggy read, and that was Zadie Smith's Swing Time. I liked a lot of how Zadie Smith pieces the story together and the multiple aspects of this kind of extended coming of age story, what I would say. So here we're following a character who has a friend from childhood, and exploring the relationship with this character's parents and this friend, and then they become employed by a famous musician and as like an assistant, and they are entertainer. And so there's a little bit of meditation and social criticism on celebrity. And I think the most sort of critique that this book is doing, they are travel to Africa and start to sort of engage in what is explained as dysphoria tourism, or to build it. And there's a lot of reflection in this book about tourism, about dysphoria tourism, about outsiders looking in on other cultures and places and judging them, about belonging, about privilege. Yeah, and I did like those pieces of the book. They were all kind of fragmented, and at some point it was hard. I would then kind of fall out and have a hard time getting back in, and I liked how it's pieced together. I did, but I wondered, I couldn't quite figure out which thread was like throwing me out, because there's also like different threads. The story with the main character and their mate Tracy, the story with the relationship with the parents, and then the story with her professional life and especially in Africa. I wouldn't read this book again, even if I didn't fully I can't say I was immersed enough in this book to give it any real, I certainly could be in a book club and talk about this book. I have things to say but I wasn't as immersed engulfed in this book as many of the other books that I read in this reading week. And I can't quite figure out why, but I do have a couple other Zadie Smiths, which I'm going to talk about hopefully in this. Going to end up being a super long video, right? And because I did like her writing style, and I did like the concepts, and I did like the themes, what I could say about this book is it didn't fully work for me. For whatever reason, I couldn't fully get into it, and it took me a long time to finish for that reason. The next book I want to talk about was one that I listened to, and that I can't say anything about that other than I just loved this book, and that's A Kind of Spark by Ellie McNichol. Oh my goodness, this was such a fantastic, this is a middle grade book. This the main character in this book has Addie. It's Addie because it's Adeline. Yeah, Addie has autism. She's diagnosed with autism. She has a sister with autism, and it shows how it's a great look at how she processes the world, how she experiences discrimination and bullying because of her autism, how she sticks up for herself, and especially has a perspective to stick up for the women who were murdered as witches, tried and murdered as witches in Scotland. And Addie has a mission in this book, which is to get a memorial plaque for these women, which acknowledges and apologizes for murdering them. This is a middle grade book, but it is complex in the way in which it sews together multiple themes, gives you perspectives, helps you and develops characters. I couldn't recommend this book enough to anybody, especially I loved the audiobook. I will one day read it again with my eyeballs or not. I would happily listen to this audiobook again at a different time just to see what I caught at that I might have missed, because when I'm listening, I'm also often doing other things, even if it's commuting. There are some other stimuli going on. Okay, and then let me see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oh yeah, 6. Creation Lake by Rachel Kushner. I thought I was going to do a hybrid like this because it was a long, I don't really hang very well with really long listens, but I did a long trip. And because the trip was so long, I was able to listen to this entire book while traveling on a bus. What I liked about listening to Creation Lake is that Rachel Kushner, the author, reads it. And I do really like it when authors read their own books. It makes me feel closer. This and Zadie Smith. So these three were on my TBR because I was reading this month Booker, long or short listed novels. So Rachel Kushner's Creation Lake. Creation Lake is her most recent novel, and it was shortlisted for the Booker Prize in 2024. It is a marvelous piece of writing. It is a terrible book. And where I didn't find it as hard to stay in it as Zadie Smith's Swing Time, I just I don't know, the pretension in this book. This is the kind of book I think that people, when they criticize or literary fiction for being a bit too into himself and maybe a little bit pretentious. Yeah. I felt that about this book. I couldn't, if I wanted to pick up a nonfiction about Neanderthals, if that was of interesting to me, I would. But these sort of long diatribes that happen in this book, then mixed with a little tiny bit of spy thriller with some character development. But I also felt apart from the history of leftist movements or extreme movements and Neanderthals, I really appreciated learning about the Kogo people. So thanks, Rachel Kushner, for that. I appreciated this piece. But here we follow this alias of the spy main character, whose alias name is Zadie Smith. And she infiltrates a radical left-wing group in a rural part of France and tries to manipulate them. Yeah, I think some of the, I'm trusting Rachel to have done the research. Well, so some of that information was interesting. The story was, it's a spy thriller, so there was nothing that was special or unique about it. It was just how it was sewn together with an extensive amount of information about Neanderthals. I think I read afterwards, or sometimes in the middle, I read reviews. I am fully capable of forming my own opinion without being influenced by other people's reviews, but I could tell that this book was going to be something that people either just really loved. It was one of those sort of as they call Marmite books. And I think I skimmed through a review when somebody said, I can't figure out if this was a really dumb, stupid book for really smart people or a really smart book for really stupid people. And I kind of felt like that too. It almost didn't have an audience. I mean, it got shortlisted for a Booker, so who am I? It didn't put me off of reading other Rachel Kushners. There was some parts of this writing style and even this narrative style that I really liked. I wouldn't read this book again, and I would cautiously recommend this to people who I'm going to use the word kind of geek out maybe on some of the things that Rachel Kushner geeks out on in this book. But other than that, would recommend it quite cautiously. And I feel like I'm not alone in that because of what I looked up sort of reviews, and it's got those mid-grade reviews because because it was quite polarizing. I'm almost done with Elizabeth Strout, Olive again. I started reading it, and then I remembered that I listened to Olive Kitteridge, and so I checked out, I listened to a sample of the audiobook to see if it was the same reader, and it was. And to be fair, this is what I can say about Olive Kitteridge. I remembered really liking the intimate view of small life, middle-aged and to post-retirement aged folks. I think that we don't get a whole lot of representation of that. And I found, and sort of in the same way that I really like Alice Munro, the amount of intimacy and the that we get with these characters, I really appreciate. I like the simplicity of her writing and how she simply develops characters, and how, especially because I'm from a rural place, I can really relate. Like there's a little bit, enough kind of stereotype of that person in the town, but then she goes into their inner world a little bit. And I really appreciate that about this duology by Elizabeth Strout. I couldn't remember any detail of these characters. I can't say any. There were a couple things I remembered, like a few little scenes, actions that I remembered from Olive Kitteridge, but it wasn't until I started listening to it again, I was like, remembered, oh yeah, I've met this character before. Oh yeah, that kind of tracks with how Olive was acting. And oh yeah, I kind of missed Olive as cantankerous and curmudgeonly as she is. I think the same thing. When I finish Olive again, I wouldn't be surprised if a few months later I couldn't tell you any details other than that I really liked the intimacy and the coziness with which we get to know these small town characters and their lives, which have a lot of tragedy and a lot of joy, and lives, like human lives that happen in these rural settings. Okay, that is it. Let me tell you a couple things about my TBR. The Bright Years by Sarah Damoff. It's addiction, setting is Texas, family drama. I wasn't sure if I was going to get bumped or not. I was trying to decide, like even last week, if I was going to read Two Nights in Lisbon or this. It's still here. I have it for like at least another week. I think I could read it, but let me tell you what else kind of came up. Much to my surprise, honestly, much to my surprise, a couple of things have come off of hold. Now, how did the holds get there in the first place? Well, I got really excited, and I thought I heard enough good things about The Wilderness by Angela Flournoy that I thought, oh yeah, I'll just, pop that on hold and it'll be there. I think it was 11 weeks. And then gloriously, like what happens with libraries, more and more people wanted it as it gained popularity and esteem through prize lists and whatever. I heard and seen a lot of people talking about it. So they got more copies, and I got bumped. I got catapulted to the top of some list. So there it was. I actually really couldn't believe it. I also have this book, which was totally spontaneous. I thought, oh, I'm going to be kind of like in interim listening. Let me find something to listen to. So I heard a reviewer talk about Unused Sunbirth, and I have it now. It came off hold. I think the biggest thing, so it's a 8-hour listen. I may get to this in my travel over this long weekend. It's kind of interesting to see another thing that just happened just today. The true story of Raja the Gullible and his mother. Like, it was the same situation. I put it on hold quite a while ago and didn't, especially since it is the winner of the National Book Award just recently announced. I just expected it to joyfully come off hold weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks later, and I was like, oh, look at this. And it just showed up today. There were other things that it said available soon, which I kind of had queued up for my November TBR. I will pull it off hold and I will have 3 weeks to read it. So it's going to be a December read. But of course, I'm going to read that book. So that's what's happening with my just library only reads. A couple of things that I had planned, maybe stuff definitely for the end of November. I just talked about Creation Lake and I had never talked about it on a TBR before. It kind of just got bumped up. It's one of my last Booker winning pile of possibilities. I have Kairos by Jenny Eppernick, which I think that I'm actually going to soft DNF. I was having a really hard time. It was like the second or third book that I was having a really hard time getting into the story, about 20, 30, 50, maybe even pages in. And I just decided I probably will like this book. I think it was just, I tried to read it right after Regeneration, and there was Regeneration has a lot of religious reference and iconography and symbolism and imagery. And I think Kairos was doing that right away. And I just wasn't making the switch. I was just kind of getting lost. And I thought, let me not force this and read this maybe at a better time. So I think I'm just going to soft DNF it because I'm ready to move on. The only book that I have left that actually I'm going to get, it's on hold. And that is The Satanic Verses. I have one Native American Heritage Month, which is I already talked about it in a former TBR. I want to listen to it and read it, so I'm waiting for that to come, the listen to come off hold. And then the last one was Charles DeLint, Someplace to Be Flying. This is not a Native American author. This is someone inspired by Native American stories. I have conflicted. I'm part of the dialogue. I like to listen to the dialogue of what that means. But I found this in a little free library, and I was curious to how well this author did this with respect or homage or perhaps appropriation or not. This book was published in 1998, just to give reference. So I am more than happy to DNF this book if I can't get into it, as is kind of I've experienced with a couple of books in the last week, and then put it back out into little free libraries. I had a couple, I thought that I was going to kind of get into mystery thriller. I thought that would be fun to just A, get a couple off my shelf, and B, kind of like end of a pretty hectic academic term vibe. Just kind of page turners, also books that I will happily DNF if they don't work. This is Jar City by Aldrenar Indresen. Arnaldur Indresen. And I've read another Arnaldur Indresen and I really liked it. It was a little bit of a historical mystery. So I found this also in a little free library and was excited because it was like my second. Oh yeah, I know exactly. I had to save it from the elements even. It was my second one by this author, so that got put on my TBR. Same with Please See Us. It's a listen. I was looking through my mystery thriller. I hauled this in Portland from a little free library, and I hadn't really addressed any of the little free library hauls. Lies. This is from the St. Vincent de Paul in Portland. In any case, it had been sitting around. It's like one of my longest ones sitting there. So I thought, let me give this a try. And I have it on audio. And then kind of my last fall vibes book, which I guess, by the way, let me go back. Olive Again, it was a fall vibes. It was What the Fireflies Knew by Kay Harris. This is a Friends of the Library sale that I just enjoyed going to so much and chatting with the volunteers there. I think this is the only book that I hauled, and it was like 50 cents. I don't know much about this book apart from it was a book of the month book. It gave me, it's 2022. It gave me fall vibes, and it's been sitting around for a while. So it's also not, it's a kind of shortish book. So those are what are on my actually physical TBR right now. And let me rapid fire. And I don't, those are bringing me right into December. In this next week, I probably will just focus on some of those books that just came off hold suddenly that I have no physical copy for. And I know I'm going to have more listening than reading time because at work, this is a short and hectic week. And then I'm traveling and then I'm around a bunch of people and won't have very much actual reading time. I definitely have more listening because I'm commuting on a bus, and that's that. I traveled to another town for work, one where I had gone thrifting at a thrift store there, and I hauled a couple of key books that I really enjoyed. One was Lisa Coe's The Leavers. I specifically remember getting them there. They actually changed where they had their books, which threw me off a little bit. But here's what I have to say about that. This is the find for me of the year. It's Girl, Woman, Other by Bernardine Evaristo. Bernardine Evaristo. And it is the Booker winner of 2019. I'm done with Bookers. Like that prompt is done, and that's how I feel. So I'll be reading this as one of my many, many, many Women's Prize for Fiction long listed books, which, by the way, it's the 30th anniversary for the Women's Prize for Fiction, and they are wanting people to make videos about it, so I might think about making some shorts as I've been curating and want to put all of my this whole collection, the books that have won the Women's Prize for Fiction in there. And I've been kind of just looking through my reads as I read the entire shortlist last year. And I have read a lot of books that have been longlisted by the Women's Prize for Fiction. Anyway, I digress. I am so excited to have found this book. I was like, why have I not seen that book? And I think this is just kind of the epic of finding things that were really popular a few years ago, like Elena Ferrante's whole series I just found. And this, when I just hadn't seen them around anywhere. Family Lore by Elizabeth Acevedo. It's like, it uses a little magical fiction, and I think that it would be, what I took this book to be was a bit of a palette cleansing book. I hauled more books than I'm going to show you now at this thrift store because I really want to support that thrift store, and one of the ways that I do that, besides just straight donating, is basically taking books. So by paying for books. This was a book of the month in August 2023, so it's a somewhat contemporary read. I like these sort of like flowery, homey vibes, and I'm sure, anyway, this is not a book that I plan to read anytime soon, but I have it in my mind as a palette cleansing kind of book. But another book that I was really excited to find was Stories from the Tenant Downstairs by Sadiq Fafana. I had heard about this before, but I couldn't quite put my finger on how or why. And then I read a little bit more about Sadiq Fafana, who is at New York University, and this is a story about a building in New York, and these are literally the stories from the tenants in the building. And yeah, I've got this today at a thrift store. I had to drop off some things, and I decided just to go in, and I was really restrictive with myself about what I was going to get from the thrift store. I actually got 2 other books, which I'm not going to talk about, but I just finished Swing Time, and I was happy to find On Beauty. Speaking of the Women's Prize for Fiction, I believe this is her winner. We will investigate that more when it hits a TBR. It seemed a little less intimidating than White Teeth, which I have here, because White Teeth is such a clunker, and I liked Zadie Smith's writing, as I said before, but I had a hard time just really getting into Swing Time, which was a little bit of a clunker, less than White Teeth. So I think this might be a better match. Oh my gosh, Friendly Young Ladies is classic sapphic, and by Mary Renault. I found this in a little free library today, and traded up. I had quite a few books to unhaul, so I traded it up. Another really kind of exciting find. This is an ARC, but it's not a new ARC. The Dead Husband Cookbook by Danielle Valentine. I know it's a little bit trendy, but I'm digging it. Like, sort of female rage horror genre. Sometimes I need these books around the same way I need sort of like palate cleansers when I read something really intensely confronting. I need these books around when I just, like, for some reason tolerate sexism in books, so that I can get to the other parts. I need these, like, sort of female rage horror type situations to process, like, how or why I would tolerate sexism in anything that I'm reading when I have all of these things to read, and or it's okay, I have an outlet. Oh, this is an ARC 2, and it's not a new one, and I'm so excited to have found it. I have the China Room right over here, and I was excited to find the China Room. I found it at a thrift store, and it was going to be one of on my Booker pile of possibilities. So as I, like, called into, and I manifested every Booker situation ever while hauling, I found that when that was on my TBR, I hauled way more Bookers. I don't know that much about Sanjeev Sahot's. I guess this would be her sophomore, right? Or maybe not. Maybe the China Room wasn't her debut. Indeed, no. She has several books before China Room. I don't know much about the premise of this book. This book fantastically has lots of space, great contrast, and I could read this even in my basement apartment, not natural light, which makes me really happy. Although it's been out for a while, so I would be able to find a digital copy. I love to have ARCs. I was really excited. This was a little free library find as well. Another little free library find was this classic. I'm going to call it. Look at this book. We have all these fancy covers. It's really interesting for me to experience what book covers do to me. This almost feels like it was a manuscript, right? There's no way I'm reading that font. No way. Just looking at it for a second gives me a headache. I just got done making a video and talking a little bit about Wallace Stegner and how much I surprisingly really liked the Wallace Stegner book that I read last year, how I would like to get to Crossing to Safety maybe this fall, maybe before the new year. And then, this will take its place, which is The Big Rock Handy Mountain. This book, its original publishing was in 1938. Then it got published again in 40, 42, 43. And then this edition is 1983. Finally, and the last of my highlights is this fantastic young adult ARC. I don't know anything about this, and if I don't, it hasn't come out yet. It won't come out until April. So here's my promise. I need to read this book before its release date, and then I know exactly where I'm going to put it. And if I don't, or if I ever come to the terms with it, I'm not, because I have to do it physically. I can. This font will work for me, especially in natural light. Because this book isn't released, so I'm not going to find, it's not, my library's not going to have it. This is my one chance at this book. I have friends who have young adult readers in their house. My child wasn't when he lived with me, and isn't still a very avid reader, but I do have friends who have young adult readers still in the house, so I might also discuss it with them a little and ask, do you think they would like this? Because I hauled it, I was really interested in it. I was so compelled actually by the cover. Could I pass it along and then they pass it back into a little free library? Anyway, I wanted to share it. I was conflicted. I almost didn't take it. I unhauled way more than I hauled today from little free libraries, and I just felt so compelled towards it, and I want it to kind of be in I have a little basket with some display books, and it might have to sit there for a minute until I figure out what to do. It was a long video, but not too long. It included my wrap up, my potential TBR for the end of November, beginning of December and some haul highlights. Until next time.